my mom was a nurse, and she'd go to work, and I'd listen to the radio, and I'd hear like different kind of music. I'd hear ska, I'd hear Motown, I'd hear Otis Redding, Dana Ross. I'd hear the man talking, reading the news. So I say to my mom, "Where's the man in the radio?" She kept saying, "There's no man in the radio." So one day when she went to work, I went to the back of the radiogram, get a screwdriver, and pop it open. And didn't see any man, but I saw resistors, capacitors, transistors, valves. So she came in and she got angry, and she gave me some licks and said, "Listen, go to the library, get a book, and you learn about the man in the radio," which I did. And by the age of 8 or 9, I then built my first radio. Okay? And that led me into a whole curiosity about sound that came in very handy when years later in England, I thought I'd build myself a mixing desk, and I'd start what was the beginning of the Ariwa Studios.
Okay, so before we get to your arrival in England and your maybe again you can enlighten the people a little bit for those who might not be aware. You say so you grew up in a place called British Guiana at the time, but where exactly is it? And
British Guiana is in the southern. It's in the northern part of South America, and in the south is the most southeasternly of the Caribbean colonies. You've got like Jamaica in the west, Jamaica, Bahamas, St. Croix in the west. Then you come around to like Antigua, and then you go south into Barbados and Trinidad. It's next door to Venezuela, next door to Suriname, kind of caught up between Brazil. It's the only English-speaking country in Latin America.
So basically, it's on the northeast or thereabouts of the South American mainland, and as you said, borders Venezuela on the one side, Suriname on the other side, and very close to that part of northeast Brazil.
Yeah, I mean, it's not typical South America. It's because typical South America, you get most people with like Spanish, Portuguese, or Italian background. In Guyana, the people, you could close your eyes and you think that you're in Jamaica or you're in Barbados. You know, there's subtle difference because we're all exponent of the slave trade that brought everyone from Africa to the Caribbean.
Indeed.
So culturally we're the same, and you know, like most Caribbean territories, you'd be mixed with like African and say East Indian. There's a lot of mixture with East Indian. There's a lot of mixture with Amerindian, which is local Indian, and you know, it's very much a mixed country, you know. But,
okay, and
but for all intents and purposes, we're African. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so you came up to England in your teens or coming into your teens?
Yeah, just before I was teen. Yeah, just before I was teenager.
And so you pursued your interest in electronics and your love of music to take it a little further?
Well, yeah, because I mean, basically my mom and dad separated. My father came to England and he was here. He was in England for like a couple of years before, and I was like a bargaining tool between my mom and dad. Yeah. And one of the deals was that I come to England and my sisters would stay with my mother. So I came to England as part of that deal. And so I didn't know my father until I got there. And then I found that he had a room full of electronic books and gadgets, and which was like right up my street naturally, you know.
Okay. So you began to teach yourself more about the workings of electronics.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I built amplifiers, start to dabble with sound systems. That was like at the end of the 60s. You know?
Okay, so are there any particular sound systems that you remember working with at that time?
Yeah, soon after that I worked with I Spy in Battersea, you know, they're all local sound systems, you know.
Okay.
That was also the point where in electronics, for those who are more technical, electronics evolved from like valves to transistors. And in transistors, we went through like first germanium transistors, then which was slightly unstable. And then we got more into the silicon transistors and then ICs, integrated circuits.
Okay, so I think you worked at one point for Soundcraft, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that came later,
Okay.
Yeah, I did a spell at Soundcraft.
And then how much further along the line is it that you actually decided to begin producing music and come with the Ariwa label?
Yeah, well, you know, working at Soundcraft is like one of the primary mixing consoles company. And working at Soundcraft, I then kind of learned the real theory behind what I knew as practical, you know? And I learned about what we got to know as signal path, which basically means like when I speak now, the signal coming into the microphone, it's a dynamic microphone which works with a coil. The sound is converted into miniature electrical pulses, goes down this cable into input section and where it goes to after that. So at Soundcraft, you had to learn what goes on with the signal, which was very, very good, which kind of led me to the idea that, you know, maybe I should start to build my own mixing desk and subsequently build my own studio.
Okay, so how and where and when did you manage to actually do that?
Well, I bought a house, and in this house they had a biggish room, which my mother-in-law said this would make an ideal family room and table, and I thought, no, that would make an ideal studio. And found the place to put my mixing desk, and I bought a piano, and I built like my echo and my reverb, and then I jumped into it and started to encourage local bands to come and record, bands from Battersea, bands from South London. They'd come every Sunday and they'd jam up and we'd put on some tracks, you know?
Okay, we're going to play one of those tracks in just a moment, but my colleague has a question first, so go ahead. Yeah.
Prof, and as a music lover, how you got introduced in dub? Through going to sessions, going to sound systems?
Well, at that time, you know, if you want to hear reggae music and dub, I mean, dub wasn't so much separate from reggae, but if you want to hear, I mean, at that time when I started, there was basically 3 forms of music. Well, you could say 4. Either is rock, soul, reggae, and jazz, you know. And we had no names like dub nor dancehall or anything like that. So going to school, you're either a soul head or a reggae guy, you know. And reggae was basically like Maytals, people like Ethiopians, Duke Reed. I mean, Studio One had a little profile. It wasn't really as revered as it become, you know. So we would go to dances, and at that time, most records would be like an A side. Well, it was just 7-inch as well. 7-inch A side. On the B side, there would be a version. That's all. So people would have the version, which was basically an instrumental without the lead instrument of the A side. And then soon after that, we went into what we call the bass and drum period, where instead of just the instrumental, the engineer would drop out like the rhythm section, the guitar and so. There was no echo, no delay, just like just, you know, no colorations, no effects. And that was like the starting of dub, you know?
Okay, so when you bought that first house and you started to do your first recording, so where exactly was it?
It was in Croydon, in Thornton Heath. I mean, it's around the corner from where my present studio is, really.
Okay.
On Grange Road in Thornton Heath.
And how much recording did you do there at that initial spot in your front room?
I did quite a lot, you know. I mean, we did people like the aforementioned Black Volts, we did Matumbi, we did some guys who started to become known, the Ruts DC, you know, yeah, a few guys came in and took part, you know.
Okay, yeah, we got a question down here, and then we're going to play music in a bit, but go ahead.
You came to the UK, I think it must have been the late 60s, maybe 70.
Yeah, 69.
What was the vibe like for you as a new arrival, and also what significance did music have to cope with a cold world, probably with a lot of hostility? And
well, England was cold. Cold temperature-wise, cold vibes-wise, it was like horribly cold. Because you're coming from a country where you run around with short sleeves like this and everybody friendly and smiling faces. Even if they don't have money, they just smile and people like communicating. You know, you're on a bus and you don't know the person next to you and they're, yeah man, what's up, where you going, blah, blah. And everyone interacting. And then you come to a country where you sit on the train and everyone's like, everybody's serious in England, you know, and you go outside and you're shivering. So, you know, it was like alien for me as a young man. And, you know, like back when we there, like the jukebox playing tunes and playing it loud on the Saturday night, you're hearing all kinds of tunes, man. Well, like, you know, Delroy Wilson, Better Must Come, and all kinds of tunes, and you come into a place where you don't hear no reggae. The only reggae you hear on the radio was some Desmond Decker, maybe. You can get it if you really want it. Yeah, those were the tracks when I just come, Young, Gifted, and Black. They're mainly Trojan records, you know.
Okay, but when you first opened this front room studio, you know, most of the people you were working with, correct me if I'm wrong, were local acts from South London that most of them were not particularly known at that time.
Most of them weren't known, but most of them knew people who were getting somewhere because people like Desmond came along. He was one of the first persons in the studio. Johnny Clark. Yeah, man.
Okay, well, let's take a listen to a couple of tracks that were from the early phase of Aweeba. I'm not sure how many were recorded in Thornton Heath and how many at the premises you moved to after that. But let's take a listen to track 1. And this is one of the classic all-time dubs. And the musicianship behind it, it's an intriguing set of players. So, Prof, you can tell us about that.
Okay, yeah.
actually playing on that track?
Well, the band was known as Aquism, and they were like a spin-off of Reggae Regulars, like the second division Reggae Regulars. Right?
Okay, so an offshoot of the Reggae Regulars.
Yeah, and it's like Horseman, who's still drumming these days.
Oh, Horseman, who plays with Prince Fatty and
yeah, I know
those
that.
crew.
He was like 15 years old, you know, young guy, very talented. The bass player guy, Bernard Cumberbatch, and the keyboard player, Sergeant Pepper. The guitar, I remember, was Rudy. He's passed away now. Yeah, and that's it. Four musicians.
And already, there's a very distinctive sound that you can identify when you hear it. It's immediately apparent it's an Ariwa production.
Yeah, because, you know, I guess it's to do with the desk that I built, because, you know, it's like a lot of homemade components, and I would EQ it a certain way. I think at the end of the day, as a producer, as an engineer, you EQ something to what's comfortable with your ears. And I've got some strange ears, so after a while, you'd know that I'm EQing it to compensate for the strangeness in my ears. All right?
Okay, so individual artistic vision. Since you mentioned Johnny Clark a minute ago as one of the early artists that you worked with, let's take a little listen to part of track 2 and see what you can tell us about this.
Music, give the people what they want. Sweet, sweet music.
Clarky.
Yeah, so how did you connect with Johnny Clark, and what was it like for him to work with you as somebody who's not, he didn't know you from Jamaica, you're not Jamaican?
No, but you know, I think in England, it didn't really matter so much whether you're Jamaican or un-Jamaican. That was the least the problem. That was never part of an issue. But Clark, he came to me, funny enough, from a guy who I saw today outside the hotel.
And who was that?
A guy named Congo Ashanti Roy.
Okay, right? The great Congo Ashanti Roy from the Congo.
Yeah, because, you know, Congo came and we were hanging out, and him and the next brethren called Ja Dave, they all knew Johnny, and they brought him in to record a track, and we hit it off, and they kept saying, well, you know, you need some artists. So next thing I know, me and Johnny is rolling wrong tongue like brothers, and we recorded 2 albums, you know.
Yeah, and as all the listeners could hear with that last track, it's quite forceful material, very distinctive sound, again, that you managed to draw out of Johnny with those albums.
Yeah, well, Johnny, he was in England because he came on a deal with Virgin. He done a deal with Virgin Frontline Records. And he was just like getting into the nuts and bolts. I mean, I learned a lot from working with Johnny, really, because he was there talking about things I knew nothing about, like publishing and songwriting splits and all the business behind what things you never see as a punter, you know? And, you know, for that, if you look on the cover of the album, you see he's outside, he's on the cover sitting in a Mercedes, and that was like his advance for doing the record. So he said, Prof, I want a Mercedes, you know? So, and he still got a Mercedes in Jamaica. When you go to Jamaica now, you know, he'll drive you around in an old Benz and
right.
Yeah, man, he's quite proud of that, you know.
And I'm wondering, those early days, with how many tracks you did record and mix, and if you had as inspiration, if you had any template coming from Jamaica, I don't know, Channel 1
right.
or Tabbies, like right. As sounds and dubs.
Well, at that time, the state of the art was 16-track 2-inch. Though when I started, everybody wanted to sound like Channel 1 because Channel 1 had the market. I mean, they had basically a 4-track desk, a couple of 4-track machines, and they had a desk that was basically API console, which is like a Rolls-Royce desk. Even though it was 4-track, it was top of the range. But everybody wanted to sound like Channel 1. And in the UK, there was this thing, there was a British song which no one seemed to like had any faith in, you know? People would always say, oh, it sounds English, it sounds thin. But from we started, probably because we started with so many the yard guys around me, we were always kind of more bottomy and more accepted like a Jamaica song. It wasn't quite Channel, but it was like a tough kind of rebellious song, you know? Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, I want to play a couple of other tracks. You know, as the label began to evolve, there was sort of twin streams of the label, or maybe 3, if you like. And so there's kind of a divide between Ariwa roots music and Ariwa lovers rock. But in both streams, you were instrumental in helping a lot of female artists to come to prominence. So let's take a little listen to a bit of track 6, and then we'll take a bit of a listen to track 7. So if you contrast that with this next track, yeah.
Going back, going back, going back, going back, going back, going back. I'm going back to country living, where the air is fresh and clean. Going back to natural living, where the grass
So how is it that the same label with the same studio is producing both those kinds of music at roughly the same time?
Well, I guess it's a reflection of my schizophrenic personality, you know, because, I mean, part of me love roots. You know, I mean, I love social comment, but at the same time, I love sweet soul music. And, you know, the first track actually is an example of what was going on in the UK at the time, because there was the Rasta thing and there was like the outer tongue thing, because Aisha, the singer, the first song creator, she's from actually Wolverhampton, Birmingham. And, you know, around that time in the late 70s and 80s, you know, kids from Birmingham who were singing didn't really get a chance. Nobody take them serious. They say, oh, you're from the country, and you'd be put on the back burner, you know? So you had people like Maccabee, Aisha, Peter Culture, Pato Banton. You know, these guys would never really given a chance in the more competitive London kind of cattle market, you know?
Right.
So, but I always like the spirit and the mannerisms from these guys. They're always a little bit more polite and, yeah, better to deal with. So I was always welcoming them, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, and then what about the Lovers Rock side of Ariwa? Because you became a key player. In fact, one of the people that really helped to introduce the genre to make it viable in Britain.
Yeah, well, you know, Lovers Rock, again, a lot of people never understood it because, like, people who like reggae through Bob Marley and the Rasta thing, they couldn't really understand how, like, you could make a song like, basically, baby, I love you and, you know, I wanna make it with you or whatever. They couldn't understand how someone like that. It's only when maybe you get a song like I Don't Want to Wait in Vain, you know, or No Woman, No Cry, you realize that, hey, even a freedom fighter have to have time to love because, you know, we all come into this world through love. So, you know. Yeah. So I always love soul music. And if you sit with me one day, you'd hear on my iPod, it go through some of the most rebellious tracks and then some of the sweetest tracks at the same time. And I love to convert good songs into like Lovers Rock with a kind of rebellious tinge, you know?
Okay. So in just a few minutes, we're going to open things up for question and answer so that the public here can put your questions to our special guest. But I do have a few more tracks I want to play, and I'm sure our panelists, my fellow panelists, may also have some further questions to put to Prof. But I think one of the interesting things about Ariwa is that you managed to revitalize the careers of some Jamaican artists who were maybe, you know, a little bit down at the time or a little forgotten. Yeah. And you also did this partly by dynamic hybrids where you had Jamaican artistry mixing with the artistry of British reggae artists. So good example of that, if you play us a bit of track 10, and we'll give a listen to that, see what you can tell us about this.
This musical sound is dedicated to each and every one of my brethren and sisters all over the world. When I meet you, the true born African.
Audrey, what can you tell us about the U-Roy connection?
Well, you know, when I was a kid and I was really being pulled into reggae, I wanted to be like U-Roy. I wanted to be a U-Roy, so I used to like record my voice, wow, and yeah, and things. So, you know, I never quite made it to recording my voice, but we were on tour in the U.S., and on the stage was like the I-Trees and Black Uhuru. This was, I think, the early 90s, might be 91, something like that. And one of the musicians said, hey, that's U-Roy standing over there. You know? I said, you joking? I said, but that's my hero. I said, okay. It's not many people are my heroes, but U-Roy was one of them. And I said, okay, I want to meet him. And so I was introduced to U-Roy, and I mean, that was a strange show, because just before meeting U-Roy, I was on the mixing desk mixing, and three skinny white guys come to me and said, what are you doing afterwards? What are you doing in the show? And I look at them, what do you mean, what am I doing? Who are you? They say, oh, okay, we're the Beastie Boys. We're wondering what are you doing afterwards, whether you want to come by my studio. So I said, well, I'll see. So within the same night, I met two guys who were pretty known. And but U-Roy, when I met him and I said, look, you know, I really love your stuff and I'd love to record you. The first thing he said, yeah, well, many people want to record I, but many people are just wasting time, so I might rather don't do nothing, you know? So I said, well, look, give me your contacts and I'll come back to you. And it started there, we talked and we negotiated, and 3 months later, flew to LA with like a bag full of tapes, and by then the Beastie Boys said, well, look, you could use our studio. So we went in the Beastie Boys studios in, I can't remember which part of LA, somewhere, run by the Dub Club side.
Echo Park.
Yeah, Echo Park. Yeah, they had a big room with basketball, where they were playing more basketball than recording. And we recorded True Born African. And it was really a nice session, really good session, because at that point, U-Roy wasn't touring, he wasn't gigging. Everyone had forgotten about him. And that album, it sold very well. It did very well.
Indeed. Yeah, go ahead, Pierre.
Prof, you're so multifaceted that is very difficult to tell the whole story. Probably we would have need a lot of hours, but I want to discuss your connection with the sound system scenes in those days, because as far as I know, you did start very early to collaborate with Shaka, and you're the man behind a lot of dub plates that Shaka was playing, and later were printed on the Shaka label, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the Shaka connection, I can't remember exactly how it started, whether it's probably through Moambasa, who used to bring a lot of like Tubby's rhythm tracks by me before the thing was done. And they would then parcel these tracks to people like Green Sleeves and thing, and sometimes they would say, well, look, just put some echo on this track and dub this one up. And so they would really pass off a lot of Tubby's tracks and complete some albums. And then they brought Shaka in, who came in, and we started to work. You know, I worked on his first album, Commandments of Dub, and Brimstone and Fire. And at the same time, we were both like running similar things. So I moved out of my sitting room then. My front room was too much for the neighbors. And we moved to Peckham. And we had this big house in Peckham, 4 floors, and he had 1 floor. So for like 4 years, we were like partners in crime. He was more connected with the reggae industry, and I was like the guy who people heard of, but they didn't really know. So like Shaka was doing most of our running around and distribution, whilst I was more in the studio.
And another question about those days, because your musical vision is so wide. You also at the time, because you were requested by some new wave bands, some post-punk bands, so you had the time to produce and work with them. So I'm wondering if those works, and I have particularly in mind Rots DC, did influence your musical vision in a way.
Well, I think it allowed me to realize that the punk scene and the reggae scene were kind of influencing each other, especially reggae on the punk, because all the punk guys, you know, like and the rock guys, Boomtown Rats and all these guys, and even guys that became the Orb, they were all listening to reggae stuff, you know. And like Warner Brothers, the A&R guy at Warner Brothers was a real reggae fanatic. Even though he was mainstream, he would like, he's got different tracks. He had a track called It's a Man's World. And he really had the idea that this could be remixed. So he called me one day and offered me a lot of money for mixing this track. And from then on, it led to like the Orb, and it led to Sade, and subsequently to Massive Attack, you know?
Yeah, go ahead down there,
Yes, Prof. I also wanted to ask a question. Are you aware that there is a new interest in traditional dub music in Jamaica? And if so, what do you think of it, and how do you feel about it? And then another question would be, the next generation is of course starting out with Joe Arriva, and maybe you can also tell us about your son and the work of your son.
Yeah, well, I do know that there's a generation of the artists, the new, well, when I say new, probably over the past 5 years, the new generation of artists like Janine, Chronix, Protege, they're all people who, they've got two things in common. One, they're all like university students. They all went to like UWI and Mona campus, and they all really love dub music, because like Protege, he came by us and he was saying there's 2 albums missing and he really wanted them, and you know, he was like well into like the Dub Me Crazy. And like Chronix a couple of weeks ago, he called me up and he's playing this track, this ding, 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 Bengali skank, and he's saying, what is this, you know? I want to do something on this. So they do,
nice.
They are interact, it's a bit like Coles to Newcastle, you know, kind of going back to Jamaica. And Janine, she's very much into dub, you know. They're all listening, but it's not so much the regular. I think in Jamaica it's probably a more class thing, because like the ghetto market in Jamaica, I don't think is any more dub aware than it was like 15, 20 years ago. I think it's still thing, but I think the real interest in dub in Jamaica is from the more university middle class students, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I mean, it's obviously in dub's heyday, the opposite was true, you could say.
Yes, yes.
But
I mean, when dub music first was getting popular, both in Jamaica and in England, it was really a heavy kind of no entry affair, you know? I mean, you know, I remember like even going to dances in Tooting and Wandsworth, where it's so dense that even regular ordinary black people would not go to those dances because they didn't understand the power of drum and bass. much less white people. You wouldn't see white people in the original dub dances. It was too dense, you know. Yeah.
So now, in the interest of time, we're about to go to question and answer, but no discussion of the Mad Professor and his career is complete without mention of this man. So give us a little bit, go to CD 2, and give us a little bit of track 3, and then we'll open things up for Q&A.
What's that one?
Yeah, you'll remember this one.
Oh, you're here. Okay.
Perry on there somewhere at the beginning.
Yeah, Lee Perry. I mean, what could one say? He's really lasted about almost 5 decades of reggae. He's touched, I would say, probably 80% of people in the reggae industry. You know,
But of all the people that he collaborated with, you've gotten the lion's share. You're the one to collaborate with him the most and for the longest period of time.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the thing about production a lot of the time is to be in the right place at the right time. I mean, because sometimes it happens, even someone like Yabayu, who I think is another mystical person. Normally he don't record for people, but luckily I've ended up with 2 albums from Yabi, you know. But Scratch is like, I don't know, some might say he's a genius, some might say he's utter rubbish. Depends, but definitely there's something special there because some say it's obia. Could be obia, could be talent. But he's definitely a guy who you could record, call him in the studio, and you could chat, and you think, oh, a load of nonsense. Then something in that recording is gonna lead to somewhere. It's gonna be of value. So, you know, he's definitely special.
Okay, so I think we've reached the time when we will turn the session over to the audience here. Good people at Rototom Sunsplash can put your questions to our special guest, the Mad Professor. So who would like to be the first person to put the question to Prof? Yes, and okay, we have a question over here. Roving, yeah. No, microphone is coming to you, yeah.
Hello. Yeah. Hi. First off, massive respect and thanks for all the music you blessed us with.
Gracias.
You mentioned at one point something about the difficulty of people not having faith in your sound and the British reggae scene and stuff. What was the thing that gave you the faith and kept going, and what inspired you and what made you keep going?
Well, when I started, if you look at like the top 10 of reggae, you would see like probably Bob Marley, Dennis Brown, Gregory Isaacs. I mean, you had probably the most productive period and competitive era of reggae. So, you know, and most of the stuff was recorded, if not at Channel 1 or Joe Gibbs, with like proper microphones, proper tape machines, proper studios, and a lot of it was marketed by big powerhouses like Island Records or Warner Brothers. And then little me come along, a guy in the studio in the front room, you know, with things recorded with some distortion. So it was like everything stacked against you. I mean, why is someone gonna come to a record shop and pick up a record by a label that nobody knew? Some were saying, so, you know. So it was like, you know, we didn't stand a chance. But I thought there was an opportunity to make something unique, like make records with vocals with a little bit of dub and a bit more space, because the dubs that were done at that time were mainly mono things, you know, and I thought I could expand and make things a bit more interesting, have things coming in on the left and going to the right, and just like a little bit more landscape sound. And I carried on because of that, you know. But it wasn't easy to get airplay. Like, you know, you'd submit your records and people would like, what's this? You know, and it was heavy.
And did you have a lot of support from the people you were working with as well, or was it more of an internal thing that you know, was your inspiration?
Well, the artists, yeah. I mean, the artists, they were all behind me because they were trying all the big labels and they couldn't get through. So here comes the guy who wanna spend some money and put them on the map. So yeah, they were like the biggest fans were the artists, you know. And they kept saying, hey, Prof, I've got this song, you know, put out this song, you know. So yeah, man, that was good.
Yeah, thank you for that question.
Yeah.
So who would like to put the next question to Mad Professor? Yes, and who, yes, over here.
First, I'd like to say huge respects, man.
Thank you.
Been a big pinnacle within the reggae industry for a long time. And I want to speak to you a little bit about the modern day sound system culture, where dub has evolutionized to with the new stepper scene and the hard stepper and that kind of thing. Where do we draw the line?
Between dub and what?
Stepper or hard stepper.
Well, I don't think you need a line. I think stepper is a part of dub. Probably an overemphasized part of dub. You know, it's integral because you have to remember that when dub really started, all the dubs were one drop music, like all the tubby stuff were all like Studio One based music, and even Bunny Lee based one drop, whether Flying Cymbal, things like Move Out to Babylon, and all the Delroy Wilson and Johnny Clark and what's his name, Linval Thompson. And the steppers really came into the scene around the mid-70s, 76.
as they originally as Jamaican music, what Jamaicans called steppers, those roots dubs.
Was roots music, things like MPLA, and of course all the Dennis Brown dubs that Joe Gibbs were doing. But what had happened when we started to make dubs in the UK, alongside Shaka, most of the dubs we were doing were steppers, because what we do, whereas in Jamaica they'd mix the kick drum, they'd mix it more within, we started to push it like 10 dB more. So that's why the kids now, they got onto the thing through Shaka, and they would just be on the bass drum, doof, doof, doof. And the steppers become like the hallmark, until some people think, well, steppers is dub, but you know, strictly speaking, it's not dub.
But also it has to be said, if you trace the career of Mad Professor at Ariwa, there's all that phase when you were doing what became known as drum and bass music in Britain, and then you did some of the early hybrids of dub and dubstep, and then of course, as Pierre was saying, you have what Joe Ariwa, your son, is doing now, continuing that. So, you know, maybe there's something of a continuum, even though it's different.
Yeah, I think it's gonna continue, and hopefully the next generation is gonna be taking it into a different vibration. The problem largely, I think, is the technology being used is mainly computerized, and it's mainly one-man based. And no matter how good and how talented you are as a one man, you need to have an exchange of people to really take it somewhere, you know?
So does that mean you recommend producing and then passing it to someone else to mix and passing it to someone else to master, or?
Well, not so much that, but I recommend in the creation stage you have like a couple of people getting involved, you know, as opposed to like one man tapping everything out on a keyboard, you know. I think you need a bass man and a separate keyboard player, because as people play together, he might contribute a little idea and, you know, you bounce it off and blah, blah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that question, yeah. So I think we have time for a couple more questions, if we have more questions from the floor. So do we have more questions for Mad Professor in the house? Yes, one at the back.
One at the back.
Greetings.
Greetings, sir. Thank you.
I'd just like to, or I'd like you to elaborate further on what you were just saying about computers, because the title of this discussion is My Computer's Acting Strange, but you're not actually that much of a fan of computers in your productions. You're more of an analog person.
Yeah, absolutely. When I started, there were no computers in the studio environment, not even to take notes, you know. It was strictly tape thing. But I done an album called My Computer's Acting Strange, because around the mid-70s, it was a popular term to like use computers, but it wasn't computers in the sense. We were calling anything with a drum machine, we were calling a computer. So it wasn't like, and it wasn't really one man. Like you get a guy programming the drum machine, and it would be a different guy playing the keyboards and a different guy playing the bass, you know. So it would still be some collaborative efforts, you know. I think one of the most popular computer songs was like Rubbered Up Soldier, Paul Blake and the Blood Five Posse. Yeah. And of course Prince Jammy's did the Slang Thing. That's known as computer recording, but it wasn't really a computer as we know it with a laptop or whatever. Yeah.
Okay, so hope that answered your question. And yeah, so we've got time for one last question here. And So who would like to put the last question to Mad Professor before we close this session? Any last questions from the floor? This is your chance to put your question to our special guest. Well, we have one other question from the panel, and then we have a few quick announcements.
So as the Jamaican producers, you were moving towards so many directions. And in terms of DJ style, we only had the Euro track, but you did record a lot of UK DJs, and there was that time in which, through the fast chat, the UK DJs were influencing the Jamaican ones. So can you tell us something about having worked with people like Maccabee or Papa Levi and all the other DJs?
Right. Well, you know, that was a very exciting period for like reggae in England, because for years, like I said before, nobody was taking the British reggae serious, you know? And for years, the British reggae suffered from trying to be Jamaican, you know, when most of the kids were born in England or elsewhere, you know? And until like the early 80s, like, well, mid-80s more like, the kids, especially from Saxon, they started to be proud of their English heritage, and they started to like chat with their Anglo-Caribbean accents, you know? And this became very popular with like Tipper Irie, Complain Neighbor, and Smiley Culture, Police Officer, and Cockney Translation is a very good example of like the whole Black UK, you know, Caribbean lingo. And, you know, I think I was a little bit late in realizing what was going on, because the whole thing was moving fast. And by the time I went to get most of the artists, they were all signed up. People like Levy, Papa Levi, Smiley, Asher Center. They're all signed up to like Island Records and Greensleeves, and there's hardly anyone around. But again, because no one was taking like the Birmingham and the Midlands posse serious, I ended up like getting Pato Banton, who came in and he did some wicked tracks with us, you know, things like Guan, Enough Kind of Dread, My Opinion. And just after he came along, Maccabee came along, and yeah, and funny enough, they're still working quite a lot, probably due more to their hard work and ability, and being nice people to work with, you know. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So just to remind that tomorrow we have a couple of very special sessions right here at the Reggae University. So there's a big focus on Rastafari for the first session. So at 4 o'clock, there will be the screening of 2 films, and it's the Spanish premiere of both these films, which are in English. First one is called Shashamani, On the Trail of the Promised Land, which is by a director, Julia Amati. And that will be followed by a short film called 10 Miles Bull Bay, which is by the director Stephen Rudder, who has just joined us in the tent. And at 5:40 p.m., we will have a discussion called From Shashamani to Bobo Hill, Rastafari Realities in Ethiopia, Jamaica, and the World at Large. Both those filmmakers will be present for that discussion, along with Julia Bonacci, who is author of the book Exodus, Heirs and Pioneers, Rastafari Return to Ethiopia. And we will also have with us Ross Flacco, who's also here in the tent, and he's from the Nyabingi Order in Jamaica. Then at 7 p.m., we have a special occasion, which is a conversation with Taurus Riley, Dean Fraser, and Elaine. So make a date in your diaries. It's a fantastic packed program for you tomorrow. Don't miss any of it. But for now, once again, please give a round of applause for today's special guest, the Mad Professor.
Thank you.